Good evening, everyone, and afternoon to some. Thank you for joining us. My name is Vadim Perlovsky, and this is the Virtual Tasting Society. Today, we're excited to try a brand that's new to us, a brand that I had not heard of until Sunita introduced me to them. And honestly, have not tried these yet because I wanted to try this with you all. So fair reactions all around. So Morris Australian Single Malt Whiskey. Super stoked to try this. As you know, I am a fan of the malt side of the dark spirits. Everybody's nodding and shaking their head. That's right. Come to the malt side. Australian whiskey has, in my opinion, has been really good to us. The whiskeys that I've tried have been amazing. So I'm expecting really great things from you guys at Morris. We have quite a few people from Morris joining us today, right? Who's on the call? You organized this. Who's here from the Morris side?
I'm here, and then of course the distillery manager, our host.
Awesome.
And Laura's here.
Hi.
Hello. So yeah, we're excited. I think anybody who's here for the first time, welcome. Thank you for joining us. The way we do these here is we're here to have fun. We're here to get nerdy. So make sure you ask questions, dive deep, ask all the nerdy whiskey questions you might have. But we do ask that you keep yourself on mute unless you're talking, so we don't talk over each other. Simple as that. Enjoy. And yeah, that said, Morris team, please introduce yourselves and tell us about what you do and who you are.
Okay, good evening, even. My name's Darren Peck. I'm the head distiller at Morris Whiskey. What I will do today is take you through a little bit of the brand and how we came around to be making whiskey. There's a lot more history to the winery though, and the winery started in 1859. So I'll explain where we came from, and then it's my pleasure to actually create these whiskies, and I will take you through tasting of 5 of our expressions.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Hey, Vadim.
Yes.
Can you tell us the order that we'll be tasting?
We'll ask right now. What order should we be tasting these in?
Thanks.
The way I would suggest to taste this is the signature, followed by the Tokay, followed by the sherry, followed by the musket barrel, followed by the smoked muscat.
Wonderful. And you will, on your home samples, you may see a spelling between the muscat and the smoked muscat. That's all me. Sorry, I couldn't figure it out in the moment, and it was too late after I already started putting the stickers on. So it's the C. The C is the right way. Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. We're excited. Anyone else want to say some introductions? No?
Sure, I'll say hi, I'm Sunita. I'm the brand manager at Morris. We work for the importer, the US importer. So
Awesome.
Thank you everyone for joining, and thank you, Derek, for hosting.
Thank you, Sunita.
My pleasure.
I'll just say a quick hi as well. My name's Lara. I'm the marketing manager for Morris Whiskey based in Sydney, Australia. Thank you so much for having us tonight in your living rooms or at home, wherever that might be, to enjoy a tasting of our whiskey. We're really excited to be able to share with you, I guess, a taste of Australia and our single malt whiskey. And you're in very good hands with Darren, our head distiller. He knows this liquid inside out. So please ask questions as we go through. Obviously, there's the comments section. I know Vadim, you'll be hosting, but you're in very safe hands with Darren. Enjoy.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. All right, Darren, the floor is yours. So please tell us about Morris, tell us about the winery, tell us about everything. We want to know.
I will indeed. Now, firstly, apologies. There are some contractors working in the distillery. You may hear them in the background. I do apologize. I should be able to talk over them. They were an unexpected gift this morning. So let me start talking with the brand. So 1859 in Australia, very similar to the US, there's a gold rush. And there's a gold rush in northeast Victoria, which is the bottom side of Australia. and lots of miners rush out there to dig in the earth and get this wonderful metal out of the earth. And of course, digging in the earth is quite thirsty work. So our founder, George Morris, what he decided was, rather than dig in the earth, he would sell them fortified wines. So he started trading fortified wines to the miners. So after a long day, they could have a nice long drink of some fortified wine and prepare for the morning. That carried on until he realized that he could probably make more money if he grew the wines as well. So what he did is, and if you ever look at our little emblem, our emblem is always a barrel, because barrels are so important to whiskey and to fortified wines, and we'll come on to that. But above it is a racehorse. Now that is a champion steeplechaser, and that horse was called Fairfield. And what Morris did was actually sell that horse and use the money to plant the vines of the first vineyards back in 1859. Now, you might have noticed by this point that I cannot say the letter H. I am actually speaking English, I promise, but sometimes I can't say the letter, well, I can't say the letter H, so that's a horse, okay? But so we've got this vineyard planted, and George starts making wines and selling them to the miners. And the name Rutherglen for the town actually comes from a competition held in the pub. It had a previous name, and the name was chosen by a Scotsman who won the right in a pub in a lottery. And he picked Rutherglen, which is a small village outside Glasgow. The name actually means Red Valley. And it was picked, and incidentally, they have a distillery too. So it ties in quite nicely. But that's how our town got its name. There is still a town just down the road called Calico Town. And calico was the material the miners' tents were made out of. And to this day, that town still carries that name. And there are names which have disappeared. I think my favourite is Gold Mine Number 6. And that's all the town was ever known as, was Gold Mine Number 6. So unfortunately, that one has been lost to history. But 1859, we've got these fortified wines being made, we're being traded. And then the story moves forward, hundreds of years of laying down wine, fortifying, selling, winning countless awards. We're probably the most awarded wineries in the world, if not in Australia without a doubt. And 2016, what happens is fortified wines aren't selling very well anymore because the numbers have fallen. People have moved away from fortified wines to table wines. And so the business, the previous owners were going to close the place. And my boss said, oh, we can't do that. We've got to save it. There's so much history and so much ingrained the part of Australian winemaking in that place that we need to buy it. So what he did is he actually bought it, and he bought it to save it. But previously I had been working on looking at a spirits business for him and looking at how we could make whiskies, and I'd done a few tours. And the reason I did that is my background is in alcohol and has been all my life. So I left university in 94, left in 94 with an environmental science degree. And the thing I found in 1994 with an environmental science degree is nobody cared about the environment. So I went back and I did a postgraduate in brewing and distilling. So I became a qualified brewer and distiller back in 96, and then embarked on my journey making whiskey and other alcoholic beverages around the world. The year I left university, 2 breweries and 2 distilleries shut down, but I was fortunate. I ended up working in the industry, or as you would call it, the hard cider industry. I spent time there until I was poached to work for a large beer company in Dublin, Ireland. Now, I won't name the brand, but the beer's black. I worked there for a while, and they own a lot of Scotch whiskey. They own a lot of US whiskey as well. So what they did was they asked me to move over to the States and start working on spirits. So I spent 2 years living in Illinois. I lived in Naperville, Illinois for 2 years. And as part of that, I ran the Toronto office in Canada, because O'Hare is the most amazing airport in the world. And I also then eventually ended up being sent down to Venezuela to work on rum. So I worked on a rum called Cacique, which I think you'll know in the States. I worked on that. I came back to the US, and then I went back to Dublin. By this time, I knew a lot of the problems, so I could solve problems with the distilleries without actually having to go there. And I liked the travel. I liked to be hands-on. So I joined a company called DSM, and I spent the next 2 years commuting on a weekly basis from the UK to either Africa or Russia, Eastern Europe, and Asia. So I would get back on a Friday night, unpack, pack my bags, and leave again on the Sunday. And what my job was to go into breweries and distilleries, and mainly distilleries. If they had a problem, I would go in and solve the problem. And the reason they got me is if you bought the ingredients my company sold, you got me to solve your problems. And I did that for 3 years, and it was a lot of travel. And eventually I was back in the UK, and I got a phone call from a recruitment agent. And he said, look, there's a job going in earlier. This would be about 2012. And he said, would you like to come down? He needs somebody who's worked on cider. I have. Worked on whiskey. I have. Worked on beer. I have. Worked on spirits. I have. I think the only thing I haven't actually done is tequila. And I'd never worked on wine though. And 2012, they said, would you like to come down? And I looked down the list, and I realized that the last inhabited continent I had not made booze on was Australia. So I'd actually got people drunk on every continent, bar Antarctica and Australia. So I came down and did Australia. So I've been down here since 2012. I worked on new product development, etc. And then I was looking at making this spirits business. So that catches us all the way up to date. Some people ask me about Antarctica. What am I going to do about Antarctica? And my wife has agreed that I can have an home brew kit and a cruise ticket on my 60th birthday. So I'm going to cruise around Antarctica, and as long as I have somebody to drink my home brew, I'm laughing. I've done it. But that's in the future. For now, though, I'm back in. We've got me into Australia. It's 2016. We've just bought Morris Winery to save it. So everything comes together. We knew when we bought this place, we were going to get all these magnificent fortified barrels. And there's 100-year-old barrels, 100-year-old casks, just filled with this delicious fortified wine. And we knew we'd get those, and we knew they are so important to whiskey. But what we didn't realize is when we walked out the back, we found an abandoned 1933 copper hybrid pot still. Now, why has it been abandoned? Well, they used to use it for making brandy and fortification spirit up to about the 80s. Fortified wine was dropping off. The ATO, which is our tax, would be the same as your TTB. We're getting a bit suspicious of a lot of grappa on the market, and the fortified wines were quite low. So making your own spirit fell out of favor. And it was sat there, and it was just abandoned. And 1933 built, installed in 1941. And so we started to restore it. We spent a lot of time taking plates out and making it safe again and getting it working. And we got it running, and about 2016, the December, early 2017, we got the first spirit off. So that spirit came off that still. How did we design the spirit? Well, we know we're not climate down here, so we know our maturation is going to go much faster than in a cold climate. So what we say down here is about 3 to 4 years is 8 to 10 in Scotland, approximate. And what we do though is we have to design our wash to match our spirit so that when it gets into the barrel, it matures well with the barrel. So I brought an expert down called John McDougall. John McDougall had worked on every area of Scotland. He'd run some very big Scottish distilleries, and we worked together changing the plates. So an hybrid still is a pot with a column. Now the problem is that column, every plate makes that spirit cleaner. But the last thing you want for whiskey is over clean spirit. Whiskey needs congeners to react with the barrel. You can't make good whiskey out of vodka. If you get vodka and put it in a barrel and taste it in 3 years' time, what you actually have is woody vodka. You don't have whiskey. It's just vodka with wood. So we designed this spirit. We know what's coming off the wash in regards to esters and other elements. And then over it comes. We change the plate numbers and we collect it. So the next thing we have to do is put it into a barrel. Now we're really lucky. We're one of the few where I can say I control everything. We have wineries where we get our maturation barrels from. So we have 2 big wineries in the Coonawarra and in the Barossa. And we take those wine barrels and we build a cooperage. And I send those wine barrels to the cooperage, and the cooper shaves them back because I don't like a lot of wine taint in my whiskey. So we shave them back, we make fresh barrels, and we mature the whiskey. From there, after 3, maybe 4 years, it will move into a finishing cask at the moment. Now, barrels are so important, and I'm actually waiting to get onto the tasting, so I know I'm talking and people are not going to drink in their hand yet, but we will get there, I promise. The last thing I'm going to talk about really quickly now, though, is barrels, because barrels are absolutely essential to the spirit. Now, back in 94, when I was doing my postgrad in brewing and distilling, a gentleman walked in and he literally said, I'm going to talk to you about wood for the next 12 weeks. And we all just stared at each other going, oh my God, how can somebody talk about wood for the next 12 weeks? It actually turned out to probably be some of the most important lectures I ever did. Now, the guy was a little bit of he had invented his own acronym. He invented one called SAP, S-A-P, after wood. And what that stood for in his head was subtraction, addition, and production. And that's what a barrel does. The char on the inside subtracts flavors. Things absorb onto that char layer and are taken out of the spirit, making the spirit finer. There's addition. So that's materials moving from natural things in the wood, moving into the spirit because they're soluble. What's obvious is if you think of bourbon, that real vanilla comes because you use new wood cask. And that new wood cask really overpowers it with vanillin and isovanillin, which is coming straight out of that wood into the spirit. And then the last one is production, and that's a little bit more complex. That's the ethanol and those congeners I spoke about going into the wood and reacting with lignins and cellulase and all those wonderful wood elements and making new flavors. And those new flavors then leach back into the whiskey. And that's maturation. Once we've actually matured, what we do is it then depends on the whiskey. So if you're ready, what I think we should do is taste the signature now. The reason being is the signature is there for 3 to 4 years in the maturation barrels. At the end, it's taken out and I put it through a quite young muscat barrel. The reason I do that is it rounds the muscat. It rounds the whiskey. It just really gives it a little bit of a nice finish. The signature, I did 2 things. Number one, I wanted it approachable on price. So you'll notice it's reasonably priced. The other thing, I wanted a whiskey what was really approachable. So I'm a great believer in whiskey shouldn't hurt you on the way down. It shouldn't kick you to be a good whiskey. It should be really easy drinking and smooth. So what you'll find on this one when you smell it, And you will smell different to me because it's a different time of the day. We've all eaten different things today, and I find different things each time. But today I am actually getting the marzipan, a little bit of the dried fruits, a little bit of alcohol on the top of the nose. And then it just, in your mouth, it's a little bit sweet, a little bit grainy, and then just disappears. It just disappears. There's no real afterburn. It's really easy drinking. Now, I love mixing this one into what is now called a, what do we call it? I used to call it a whiskey and soda. You see, I'm very old, but it mixes beautifully. I have no issue with people mixing whiskey. Eyeball, thank you. I have no issue people mixing whiskey. I once was in a distillery in Scotland with a very, very famous distiller, and he was talking about whiskey, and the guy walked in and he ordered a top shelf whiskey and ordered Coca-Cola with it. And the amount of people going, oh, you'd have thought the windows were going to come in as well. There was people taking such gasps of breath. And this distiller just literally turned around to me and said, Darren, there's three things you've got to know. He said, number one, when you pay money for whiskey, it's now your whiskey. Number two, whatever you want to do to your whiskey to make it the drink you want to drink, you do to that whiskey, whether it be coffee, Coca-Cola, or iron brew, it doesn't matter. You do whatever you want to that whiskey to drink it. And then he shut up. And after about 2 minutes, I said, okay, what's number three? And he literally looked at me and said, you're going to be really hard to teach. He said, number three is obvious. It's our whiskey they buy. So what do people think of that one? Really smooth, really easy drinking.
I'm going to start with the obvious question. At 44%, is this one chill filtered?
It is chill filtered, but not deep chill.
Okay.
So I use it just to polish the top rather than a really deep chill. So I am not opposed to chill filtration if I think it makes the whiskey better.
Wow, that's really light, very easy to drink. You're right. It's just easy drinker, but it still has a velvety mouthfeel, which is really nice.
100% malt, 100% Australian malt, all grown in the area. So we tried to be 100% Australian. So yeah, everything grown in this region. We use water from the Snowy Mountains, which flows through the rivers around here. So yeah, it's really malty, should be really easy drinking.
This is dangerous.
Do you use any particular varietals of barley, or is it fairly standard, like in Cherokee or something?
At the moment, we are using a mixture of Westminster and Gardner. Now, we're very lucky in Australia. We grow a lot of brewing barley for beer, which is normally slightly different because beer barley doesn't normally have the high diastatic power. But because we sell a lot of our barley into Asia, where they use a lot of adjuncts like rice, which doesn't have any enzymes, we grow high diastatic varieties. So it actually turns very, very nicely. We are looking at planting some other varieties. We've got some planter called Spartacus. And I really hope that works, because anybody as old as me knows that I'll just have everything labeled Spartacus, I'm Spartacus, but we'll see if I'll get away with it. I don't think Lara would agree with that one.
And do you use a distiller's yeast or anything special there too?
I use a blend of two yeasts. Obviously, I can't tell you which ones, but what I do is I actually use two distiller's yeasts, but I blended them together because I want something what gives me enough esters to carry me through that fast maturation. So what you'll find sometimes in hot climates is if you haven't balanced the spirit going into the barrel, you will get something which is over barreled. So you get a lot of tannin, a lot of harshness without the esters and fruitiness to carry it.
And you said this is a fast fermentation?
I wouldn't say it's too fast. It's medium though. It's not one of the long ones.
How long is your fermentation?
I would try to turn them around in 5 to 7 days.
That's solid. And then you're doing double distillation?
Yes, so wash still takes it up to about 24%. And then into the still I told you about, the copper hybrid pot still, and that takes it up to about 72. We then chamfer back to 63 for barrel. So the one thing I forgot to tell you about the pot still is obviously restoring the pot still. We ended up naming the pot still Aurora, which is, anybody who's got small kids knows, is Sleeping Beauty, because that's what she was. We then found the sister still up in a town called Griffith. And when I say a sister still, she was also handmade in the 1930s, and she is a quarter of an inch smaller. But we brought her down, we've restored that still as well. That still is also producing spirit, and we call that still Ella, after Cinderella should also come to the ball. So I think I'm going to run out of Disney princesses eventually, but I think Leia is now classable as a Disney princess or something. So we'll see.
The way they're pumping out Disney princesses, I think you're safe.
We'll see. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next one, which is the Tokay. This is a whiskey what's very special, very close to my heart. It was one of the first ones I actually we'd laid down in barrels. So we laid down for finishing. So we get the matured whiskey and then we put it into finishing barrels for up to 3 months. Now I say that because I can't tell you how long it's going to be, because the problem with my climate is it's so hot that if I left them there for longer, all you would taste is the fortified wine. You wouldn't taste any of the spirit. You wouldn't taste any of the whiskey, because our extraction rates are so quick. But this was put into Tokay barrels, and we launched it a year ago or so with a whiskey club down here, and it went phenomenal. They sold out, and it won a platinum at the SIP Awards, and it won double golds at San Fran. So what we did is, obviously I put some more in barrels thinking, well, this is going to sell well. We're out of the embargo time, and so I put another blend together. I've actually blind tasted this. I can't tell the difference between the two batches, and neither can San Fran SIP Awards, because we just won platinum again, and we just won a double gold on it again. Now this one is in a Tokay barrel. Now Tokay in the wine world is known as Topaic. It's a white fortified wine made from muscadel grapes. And I will come on when we do the muscat how we make fortified wines. But what happens is we've taken the liquid from the grapes, we've put it in this cask, and the cask will hold that liquid for 20, 30, 40 years. There's 3 classifications. The classification what did the signature will be about 6 to 8 years old. The classification what does the old premium is 20 plus years old in a barrel. So this is the same sort of spirit base but finished. So when you smell it, you're going to smell a real sweetness, and almost a winey note on the nose today for me, which is unusual. But it's quite a delicate. It's rounded that. It's a delicate floral, as I like to say. Very perfumery. I've seen that comment. That's a good comment. Now it's very, very smooth again. So in your mouth, you get that roundness, you get that sweetness. You've got a bit more alcohol here, so you get a little bit more burn. You get a sweetness in the mouth. It fills the mouth slightly, and then again just disappears nice and softly at the end. So the signature was finished in a young muscat barrel. The Tokay is finished in a Tokay barrel.
So they're
Just
all
let everybody-
so just to reiterate, they're all starting in ex-bourbon casks from America?
No, they all start in ex-wine, shaved and retoasted in our. So we shave them back to get rid of the wine, and we retoast them in our own cooperage. And I use a blend of American and French oak.
Wow. And where are you getting the casks from? Local wineries?
No, we own two very large wineries, one in the Barossa, and it's our own casks.
Oh,
So
no.
literally, we have control of everything.
Wow.
The only thing we don't control is the maltster.
It's amazing. So Tokay is different from Tokai in Hungary, right?
It is. So the Tokay in Hungary is more of a red wine. And down in Australia, it was always a fortified white wine, though we had to change the name to Topake because Tokay was too close to Tokay.
Mm.
So when they upset the Italians, we had to change our name too. But on a whiskey, because that law only applies to wine varietals, and I'm saying what type of barrel it is, I'm allowed to use Tokay again.
Gotcha.
The interesting one about that geographical protection is some of the best producers of Tokay were probably the Italians around the Venice area, and they lost it because the town was just over the border. Okay. So what we'll do is, I think we'll move on to the sherry. If everybody's ready. Now, before we move on to the sherry, I must give you an heads up about the sherry. Do not expect a big Scottish sherry. The reason I say that is coming up, you'll see where my sweet offering is. So don't think of an Olorosa. When you make sherry, what you do is you take a Palmino wine and we put it into casks. And this is what we call a Fino. And the Fino sherry is made by the winery having its own bacteria and yeast in the air. And they settle on top of the liquid and then they give it the flavor. That's what makes the sherry, give its sherry the flavor. Ours is like I said, it's a Fino, so it's very, very dry. So we take that dry sherry and we put it into oak and we call it an aged amber. But again, it's very, very dry. So when you taste this one, do not expect sweetness. You're actually going to find it very dry in the mouth, a little bit astringent, but then you'll find nuts and look for the citrus at the end. And it's quite a strong alcohol. So you get an alcohol build at the end, but then the citrus just washes that away. So what I'll do is I'll pour some of the sherry. And on the nose, straight away you can smell Fino. You can smell Fino sherry. And this has come from those aging barrels. In the mouth, you're getting those nuts, a little bit of roasted taste today. And then a lot of citrus at the end to me. But obviously everybody tastes differently, so we'll be interested in what you're tasting.
This one is definitely, I'm reading the comments, and this one's definitely, everyone has a different tasting note. It's a Rubik's Cube of a nose on this one.
Yeah, very complex, very different. not the sherry you would expect.
So Fino sherry, I've had it recently. It's a very dry. It's like a sour, really
Yes.
dry white wine. It's really insane.
Yes.
Not at all what I expected when somebody said, "Oh, I brought sherry."
Yeah, you would be expecting what, like the sweeter sherries, the Olorosos, or sometimes they're called white ports over here, and then the sweeter style. So before we go on to the Muscat, because the Muscat is our flagship, our most famous wine in this region is our Muscat wine. And you can see the picture behind me as well.
So Muscat
So
is not the same as Moscato.
No, absolutely not. So Moscato is actually made from the Muscadel grape, which is used to make Tokay.
Ah, that's
So
not confusing at all.
not confusing at all. The really weird one is that this is a Muscat and it's made by the brown Muscat grape. The Muscadel grape, though, is not actually a Muscat grape. There's two families and it gets ridiculously complex. So I won't go there, okay? But this is made from brown Muscat. And I say that it's world famous. It's won the Muscat du Monde, which is the Muscat competition of the world. But now twice, I think we've just done it again this year. We've entered it into the London Wines and Spirits Show, and our Muscat not only came best Muscat in all of the show, but it actually came best fortified in show. So that means it's beaten all the ports, all the sherries, the best. And I believe we've just done it again. Now, the first time we found that out, it was hilarious because just down the road, we've got a little olive grove, a little tiny place. He sells a few olives, and he'd entered his Kalamata olives, and he actually won best Kalamata olive in the world at the same time. So for one day, a square mile of Australia had two world's best. But Muscat, let me go on to the story of Muscat, for I find this fascinating. What we do is we take those brown Muscat grapes and we crush them, and we put them into a big pit and we let them ferment for about 24 hours. Then I send somebody in with a shovel to dig them back out into a press, and we press all the juice, those few little fermentation flavors, into another vessel. And those grapes were about 18 Burme, which is a sugar measurement, so very, very sweet. You've only fermented them for 24 hours. So you've got all that sugar left with a tiny bit of alcohol. So what we do is we add fortification spirit. We add brandy spirit. We kill the fermentation. We take that wine up to about 20% alcohol, and then we put it into vats, and we leave it there for years and years. Now, all those years we do that, we are never allowed to add sugar. So when you taste an Australian fortified sweet wine, no sugar has been added. All that sugar comes from the grape. We are allowed to top up the alcohol to protect it, but all the sugar is from the grape. So it's there for 20 years. It soaks into the barrels. It's what you're going to notice has changed and finished this whiskey you're going to taste next. But we made 1859, we were 160 years old recently, and we actually blended a port for our 160th anniversary. And we used wine in that liquid from the 1930s. Now that means that when you drink a glass of that wine, you are drinking sugar that grew in Australia before the war. It's just unbelievable, the history. Now, I normally tell the joke that my doctor says that sugar that's over 10 years old has no calories, but if you can see my belly, that's a total lie, so I'm not going to repeat it. Okay, but we will go on to the Muscat barrel. So this is the base spirit, came out of that maturation, 3 to 4 years old, and has gone into old Muscat barrel. So this has held some of the older liquids. Now, if you ever get to the chance to taste the Muscat itself, please do. everybody tells you one thing about it. It's Christmas cake in a glass. It's prunes, it's sultanas, it's dates, it's raisins. And what you'll notice as soon as you smell this whiskey, you're getting dates and prunes and raisins. Now, this whiskey has been in barrels where this wine has been there for 20 odd years. So what else is soaked into that wood is a little bit of sugar. So when you taste it, you get a rush of sweetness followed by a real smooth alcohol effect. And then it just, again, vanishes because, like I said, I don't like whiskey what keeps kicking me for 2 days later. So you've got that sweetness, you've got raisins, you've got Christmas cake, you've got all those beautiful sweet notes and raisin notes from that wine, which has come through from the barrel. It's one of my favourite whiskies in the world. We call it a Rob Roy. It's a Manhattan, but obviously Manhattan's normally made with bourbon, but blends beautifully into that type of cocktail.
This really reminds me of like a tawny port. This is so good.
So we make tawny as well. It's a slightly different wine down here, but yeah, it's the same process to make a tawny. So it's the same fortification. You get those same fortified notes.
And you said how many grams of sugar per liter?
There's none added. It all comes from the barrel. I don't actually measure it.
No, I'm saying naturally in the Muscat.
Oh, naturally, 18 Beaumet. I'd have to do the calculation for you.
Okay.
I think it's 4 times or something. It's very sweet. So our grapes are normally harvested before the mold, for we don't want that botrytis flavour. So it's before botrytis sets in, but at that time in the season where they're really at the peak richness and full of sugar. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little story now before we taste the last one. I know that we've been almost an hour, but the next one we're going to taste is a smoked muscat. Now, the smoked muscat came around because of an argument. I love peated whiskey. I really adore heavily peated whiskey, but one of my marketeers doesn't. And I said I wanted to make a smoked whiskey, and we had a bit of a debate about it. But the problem is I couldn't use peat because there's not really that much peat down in Australia at the moment. Some people are experimenting it a little bit out of Tasmania, but I don't think it's there. It's not at the quality level I would want it for my whiskey. So what I did is I had this argument with him. I said, right, I'll make you a smoked whiskey without using peat. So as I told you earlier, I have got a cooperage. So what I did is I sent these barrels to a cooper, my cooper, Anton. I said, Anton, I want to, you know, a crocodile char? He said, yes, I know what a crocodile char is. I said, good, when you get there, leave them on fire. Just make sure they're integral enough to hold finished whiskey. I said, as soon as they're out and it's safe to do so, put the ends on and bung them as soon as it's safe. I want all that smoke trapped in the barrel. And he did, and he sent them back. And I laid down a number of liquids. I got whiskey, I got the sherry, my finished sherry, and I got finished muscat. And why did I have my best bet on muscat? Because although I'm a Brit, I have once been to a successful barbecue where it did not rain. And what I realized is sweet and smoke go perfectly together. So if you take the sweetness of the muscat whiskey, I then put them into this burnt cask, it should give you something really special. So I'm going to pour the smoked whiskey now. Like I said, it should give you a really different, it's not peaty. I know some people will be scared, wondering if it's peat or not. It is not. It is wood smoke. So when you smell this, I like to say this is Australian smoke, not Scottish smoke. So you smell it and you get campfire, which you'll know all too well. You get wood barbecue. You get wood pizza oven. You get the smell I don't want to smell in the morning. So I live rural Australia, and if I smell this smell, I check what's on fire. And normally it's most of the country. On the mouth, real rich, real sweet. That smoke and sweet just blends together beautifully. It's really mouth-filling. It's the Eugenol. It's peat without peat. One of my favorites. I hope you think I won the bet. I like the thing about toffee. Yes, it does have a little bit of a toffee note.
Darren, I gotta say, you're flying through these. We normally take 2 hours at least. And
Oh,
I
sorry.
didn't realize you're flying through them so quick. But give me 1 second. Let me did want to grab a snapshot of you smiling. Got it. All right, that's gonna be the default on the YouTube. That's perfect. And then I do want to invite everyone to grab a glass of something and turn on their cameras for our traditional toast. I totally you raced right by me. Everyone grab a glass. Laura, James, Shane. There we go. Get some beautiful people on this call. There we go. There we go. All right, I want a glass too. I want to be with the beautiful people. All right, everyone. So I do want to say, Darren, thank you so much for being here and spending the evening with us. Sunita, thank you for setting it up. It's a pleasure, and cheers to you.
Thank you so much. Cheers. Sanjima.
One more time, everybody smile to the camera. Got it. I was so busy smiling and cheersing that I clicked right next to the capture button. All right, got that one. And since we're already on the last pour, please go ahead and vote.
And I feel like I have to go back through them. They all had really interesting, differences.
You should.
I try not to do the same thing twice.
Yeah, I mean, they're all fortified wine, but they're all so different. You're right. It's so interesting. And they're all American and European oak, right?
Yeah, American and French oak.
Okay. Have you considered experimenting with any other kind of oak? Is there oak in Australia?
We've got what they call gums, and they're a little bit oily. We have looked at doing things, but I will probably play with the wash first and maybe experiment with different grain mixtures until I need to really change the barrels. The trouble with barrels down here is they're tailored to my climate. And that's my problem. And you see, Scotland will be -4, -5 in winter to, Well, John McDougall said I'd have to stop the stills and slow them down in an heat wave. And I said, what's that? He said 23 Celsius, which unfortunately I don't know what's in Fahrenheit. But our normal temperature is 41 in summer. So we'll range from -6 last Thursday to 41. It's Chicago weather.
Wow.
Is your still house have air conditioning, or do you all have to wear ice vests or something?
We don't have air conditioning. We just open the doors. The guys don't have to be next to it all the time, so they do wander out. And yeah, we have lots of ice poles. We do have ice vests on site, but none of the guys really want to wear them. So we have lots of ice poles, lots of breaks, lots of water. We actually, every year, one of the first things I do in January, because obviously our summer is the other way around, so we're in midwinter now. First thing I have to do is give them the heat stroke toolbox talk, and this is what to watch for. This is what we do.
How's your humidity? Are you very humid or very dry, or where do you sit?
We're actually very dry, so we're not that bad. Ours is a hot, dry heat. So our angel share is very, very large, but we don't lose that much ethanol. So it's actually water what's leaving our barrels rather than ethanol, which is nice because it's just that balance of humidity. But no, we're very, very dry. Not normally, saying that, we've had 2 years of El Nino, and El Nino has absolutely drenched us, and we've been flooded 3 times in the last 2 years. But Australia goes in cycles, so the floods come. Well, actually, the fires come and burn everything down, which means that when it rains, it runs off and then we flood. But then the water makes everything grow, and it grows really fast. And then the sun comes out and it becomes tinder again, and we set back on fire. But that's just the natural cycle of Australia. And there's actually plants down here that can't survive without fire.
Yeah, we love our forest fires here in California too.
Yeah, yeah, we've had some bad ones. So there's a place called the Blue Mountains, which has a blue haze over it. And only recently did I find out that that blue haze is because I told you about these gum trees. Now, gum trees are like, think of a eucalyptus. So, you know, eucalyptus oil, they're really oily trees. And that blue haze is actually flammable oil just hanging over the trees in a big cloud. It's, yeah.
That sounds like a good plan.
Yeah. And we wonder why the place catches fire. Gum trees also have another bad habit of exploding when they catch fire. So they spread the fire even further.
So Darren, I'm not sure if you've said this already, but what is your favorite? I hate to ask, but.
It would depend on the occasion. I love a signature because I can sit on a Friday night after work and go through quite a lot of signature. My everyday cocktail one is the muscat, and if I'm really treating myself, I'll have a smoked.
The smoked is very unique. I really like that a lot. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, the smoked is definitely a forest fire in a glass. Not peated at all, but you can definitely taste smoky wood.
That's it.
I did I used to make smoked salt. I'm really into salt, so I put some salt in a grill, and I put a tube smoker next to it, and I thought it'd be fun to do that. And I was up in the mountains here in LA, and I didn't realize that weekend while we were up there, they were doing a controlled fire, so they're burning the forest. And walked out in the morning, looked at the salt, and it was like dark brown, and it had soaked up all of that fire, all that smoke from the forest fire. And it was the most unique, amazing salt because it tastes like a forest fire. And it's like, this is like the salt from that trip. So everyone in the family got a little vial of that stuff. It was really cool. This is what this reminds me of. Yeah, not peated at all. This is just straight up burnt wood.
Straight up burnt wood. And not smoked malt either. So we haven't smoked the malt, we haven't done anything. It all comes from the barrel.
It's the most unique smoked expression that I've had in a long time. That said, everyone has voted, and I think everyone has. Sunita, did you vote? Still open. Good.
No.
2 people outstanding. So if anyone hasn't voted, vote now. But Darren, what do you think was the group's favorite? We voted for our favorite expression of the night.
I would say people like the muscat because of the Christmas cake and the sweetness.
All right, and the results are in. You know your stuff. Muscat
Right.
takes number 1 with 44%, and then second place is sherry and smoked muscat. There you go.
That is a tie between sherry and smoked muscat.
Yeah, with quite a few votes each, 4 votes each. That's a solid tie.
Mhm.
That's good. Darren, what would you say is in the works? What are you most excited for that you're working on that's going to be coming out?
Obviously, I've got quite a few things laid down. Very excited to see what's happening with one of the other smoked expressions I laid down. I laid more than one down. The muscat was my best bet and turned out to be my best bet and was ready when I needed it ready. There was another one I'd laid down, which has taken a little bit longer to mature and round. And obviously, I'm not going to release anything until it's ready. Hopefully, there should be a little bit of a smoked surprise coming later in the year.
Are you playing around with any other woods, or you're keeping everything local, right? So everything you're keeping
Everything
to
local.
Australia.
So we're looking at different grains. We might look at doing something with rye. Eventually, obviously, that moves us away from the malt whiskey area, but there's lots of things we're looking at the moment, and I'll just keep toddling along and enjoying my experimentations.
For sure. That sounds fun. How much leeway do you have to play around versus make the core expressions?
We're really lucky. Like I said, we're a family business, so we own everything. So really, I talk to John, who owns the business, and he says yes.
Yeah,
Really,
I was thinking, since you guys, really do have a great reputation in the wine world, from what I know, I feel like that probably lets you play around, a little bit with whiskey to try and tinker and make interesting stuff. It seems pretty cool.
yeah. And we've always got that freedom to experiment, and we've actually, the nice thing is we've got freedom to fail. It's all right having a freedom to succeed, because if you succeed, everybody's happy. We've actually got a freedom to get it wrong sometimes as well.
How many liters a year do you produce?
Sorry?
How many liters a year do you produce?
Okay, that's a good question. Of base, so spirit, maturation spirit, because I've got both stills running now, I can produce about 100 barrels a week. So that's up to 30,000 litres a week. So if you multiply that out, it's not a small distillery. So,
is Australia following any regulation with year maturation?
we have very little regulation down here. The actual law says 2 years in cask. I actually go for 3 to 4. I don't agree with all the Scots regulations, I'll be honest. I think they tied themselves in knots, but I want to be a true single malt, so I stick to what I believe is a true single malt. So
Any other questions? Anyone have anything else? Sounds like Darren has the answer to everything. Can't stump him today.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. Thank you for spending the afternoon with us or the evening with us. These have been absolutely fantastic. We're looking forward to more expressions and to buying some when they arrive in States. Thank you, Sunita, for bringing this to us. This has been absolutely fantastic.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you everyone for being such great participants and so interactive with everyone. So actually, I do have one question. What do you think the future of the Australian whiskey industry is? Do you think it's going to continue to grow and expand in the US? What are your thoughts there as far as the category as a whole?
I do. I think there's opportunity to grow. I think the US has always been somewhere where people look for something different to taste. People aren't always in the future going to be tied to, oh, it's got to be Scots. Remember, pre-Prohibition, it was Irish. After Prohibition, it was Scotch. So yes, there's a great opportunity, and I think people will embrace the product as long as it's good quality and delivers what they want.
That's great. I've seen a lot of excitement. I've seen more article coverages on Australian whiskey, and it's a great story too to transition from the dessert wines to whiskey. So thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure.
Yeah, I think Australia is putting out some really, we've tried every Australian and Tasmanian whiskey I've tried so far has been really delicious. And it's pretty amazing that you're able to put out mature, delicious spirit in such a short amount of time. Like something that takes Scotland 12 to 15 years, you're able to do in 5.
And you're coming back to that temperature.
Yeah, those temperature swings for sure.
Many biologists among you, a 10-degree centigrade increase in temperature doubles a biological rate. The same with chemical reactions. So that interaction within that barrel is going much faster at 30 degrees than it ever will at 15.
Are you doing any single barrel picks in the US yet?
We are looking. I've got some barrels which might have a big chalk mark on saying do not touch, but that will be more through Lara, I'll be honest.
Yes, we're sort of discussing the idea of doing single barrel picks, but it is very challenging, especially bringing them over from Australia. But it's definitely in discussions. So thank you.
I can imagine that these are fantastic and so easy to drink at 46 and 48. But I can imagine at cask strength they'd be something fantastic. I think the sherry or the muscat at cask strength, the muscat being a little sweet, the cask strength would cut through the sweetness. I can't wait to see this at What's the proof you're pulling out at?
Of the barrel?
Yeah.
The ABV out of the barrel coming out is about 64, 65. We get a little bit of we get a little bit of an increase because we're really dry. So the way Angel Share works is, don't get me wrong, we're still losing because we lose 20% rather than 5 to 7% in Scotland. But where Scotland will lose 5 to 7%, they're wet. Let's be honest, they're very wet. So what happens is alcohol moves out of the barrel into the atmosphere to create equilibrium, or try to. Down here, because we're so dry, there's no water in the air. Because the water is a smaller molecule, the water moves out of the barrel quicker. So we actually concentrate the alcohol slightly, but we do lose a massive volume because of it.
What's the highest ABV you've seen so far? Any hazmat barrels? We lost lights.
I know, I think we lost him coming all the way from Australia, but what a treat to have someone with his expertise to have a distiller.
That was
here.
amazing. His history is just wow.
Yes, he was in San Francisco. I got to meet him in person last year for Whiskey Fest, but I believe his colleague Michael, who's also great, he's sort of the head of marketing. He will be in Los Angeles and San Francisco at the end of August, early September. So I think we're participating in whiskey and barrel night.
Okay.
And I have not been to that, but I figured it's worth checking out, and it happened to coincide with Michael's visit. So Michael's great too, a marketing expert and very informed on whiskey. So but yeah, it was great to hear Darren's story, because this is actually the first time I actually heard heard the story of Morris as well from his point of view, and it's very good at storytelling.
Yeah, that was great. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for hanging out with us. As always, I'm not kicking anyone out, but I'm gonna stop the recording. We lost Darren, but we're gonna just hang out and have a dram, and thank you all so much. So cheers and see you next week.
Cheers.